Now, I want to go to Wayne Madsen, D.C.-based investigative journalist, author, and syndicated columnist. He's appeared all over CNN, Fox, CBS, PBS. He worked for the National Security Agency, worked for naval encryption. I mean, he worked for the Department of State, the Data Automation Command, National Security Agency, on and on and on. He's here to break some major 9/11 truth news, but he's also exposed government narcotics trafficking. So let's cover that first. Wayne Madsen of WayneMadsenReport.com. I mean, do you agree with me that this is just the mainlining of the doublethink, of the mind control, because they can't hide it anymore? That, okay, we're growing it, but we're doing it to fight al-Qaeda.
Oh, absolutely. And it's not just, now we have reports from the United Nations that it's not just heroin and opium coming out of Afghanistan, but it's cannabis. So they've actually found a new cash crop to deal in.
And you heard them. The troops help grow it. And so
right.
our men and women are now farmers for the CIA.
That's right. And the biggest problem is that where is this heroin going to? It's getting across the border into Tajikistan to the north and winding up on the old Silk Route, the Silk Road. It's going east into China and west into Europe. And, of course, the Russian government, the Chinese government are well aware of the fact that this stuff is coming out of Afghanistan and who's involved in this illicit trade. You got Karzai. Hamid Karzai's brother is one of the biggest drug warlords in Afghanistan.
Oh, let me stop you again. New York Times just admits the whole thing. Right here, U.S. turns blind eye to opium in Afghan. They're not turning blind eye. They're right there getting the goodies. Go ahead.
Right, and the biggest fear of China is that they're looking at this as another opium war. You know, we already have reports coming out of Yunnan province in China that young men are getting hooked on this stuff. They know where it's coming out of, and they're not, frankly, they're not happy about it. And the history of the opium wars with the British and China, they understand that that's what helped defeat the Chinese before, and they're worried that the West has similar designs now.
Well, that's important. I mean, this is a British model. Skull and Bones that set up our CIA on record was a British model to use a drug war to take over the U.S. because they'd already done it 100 years before in China with the Opium War. That's how they corrupted the police. That's how they took over the society.
Right, and we also know that the route to the west, to Europe, it goes through Turkey. And what we're seeing now with the present Turkish government uncovering this deep state that has existed in Turkey for a number of years, that part and parcel of that deep state, it's called the Ergenekon network, is the trafficking in opium, and the opium's coming via land from Afghanistan.
Continue.
And so, you know, from Turkey, where does it go? It goes through the Balkans, where our friends with the Kosovo Liberation Army have dealt with that for years. You know, that's Madeleine Albright's good friends. She set up the KLA, and once it hits Kosovo, boom, France, Germany, Scandinavia, the Netherlands, Italy, that's where the money's made, on the street.
Now, government drug dealing, white slavery running, kidnapping, all of it takes us back full circle to 9/11. Sybil Edmonds, FBI, NSA translator. She's now been able to finally break her gag order in court. Last year, she told Congress this behind the scenes. They put a gag order on her that she was listening to the Taliban and al-Qaeda senior leadership, including Osama bin Laden, running slaves, running drugs, running weapons all over the Middle East and Central Asia under direct command of the Central Intelligence Agency, even to the day of 9/11. She was hearing this on the day of 9/11, and then now the Turkish government has discovered that they have a military deep state, just like we have a deep state system here. And before we get into this new 9/11 information you're dropping on folks, and I've done the research, everything you put in this report ties into separate public info, but it's devastating. We now have confirmed Army drill manuals where they're training to take on Tea Parties, gun owners, and returning veterans. Much worse than the MIAC and Homeland Security report in there. It's the biggest troop training we've ever seen. This has been going on for decades. This is a total training op to prepare for martial law.
Well, that's right, and a lot of this goes back to the 1980s when we had Rex 84 cobbled together by Oliver North and his chums on basically just taking everybody into custody who didn't agree with the Reagan administration and putting them into facilities, detention facilities. This is an old plan come back to haunt us decades later.
Again, Wayne Madsen, so many times when I'm watching C-SPAN and watching a national security hearing, you see him there in the background reporting. You have amazing sources in D.C. The headline at WayneMadsenReport.com, it's also an online journal, and Infowars.com. The super classified network that served as command and control for 9/11 false flag attack. Break it down for our audience, this incredible information.
Okay, what I gathered was that there was a very highly classified system with limited number of people. Now, it didn't take a lot of people to be in charge of this command and control operation, because all it entailed that day was letting people know, certain people know this is not a training drill, this is real time, and take the necessary actions to carry out the attacks. The system, I first heard the phonetic description of the system called PDAS, P-D-A-S, and I didn't find out what it stood for until a few days later. And what I've gathered is that the system stands for Planning and Decision Aid System. There's only about 75 to 100 terminals throughout the U.S. government. Maybe a couple hundred people have access to this. They all have what's known as top secret, special compartment, sensitive compartmented information, clearances, special access program clearances. And this was the system. I do know one message was transmitted from the Chief of Staff of the Air Force on the morning of 9/11 to other terminals, PDAS terminals, that basically stated the Air Force has successfully intercepted the target over Pennsylvania. Now, whether that was Flight 93, I don't know. But that certainly corresponds with similar stories about what happened with the target that was moving in on Washington, D.C., where Cheney is sitting there with Mineta. Mineta says Cheney, a young enlisted man, came in and said, "Does the order still stand?" And Cheney responded, "Of course the order still stands. Have you heard anything to the contrary?" It's quite apparent that it was PDAS, which is operated under the Secretary of Defense. This was the system that was used to provide the alternate command and control system on 9/11. And again, this corresponds with another system called the Criticom system, run by the NSA, where a similar message came over that morning.
And is that why even Anderson Cooper and CNN and CBS confirm doomsday planes from before the attack and after were all videotaped at about 50,000 feet circling, because it's this doomsday COG deep state emergency dictatorship system that they were using to run the attack?
Yes, well, the National Emergency Airborne Command Post, as you call the doomsday plane, where the Joint Chiefs of Staff goes in the event of a nuclear war, does have a PDAS terminal on board that aircraft. So obviously it was very much instrumental in this whole operation. And there was another intelligence system run by the NSA called Criticom, which, again, a similar message came across that same morning that stated the Air Force has successfully intercepted the target over Pennsylvania. So we have two very highly classified intelligence systems that morning talking about the interception of the target over Pennsylvania. So the whole thing about the cell phone calls, the passengers storming the cockpit, all obviously a major psyop ruse to try to convince people that some guy said let's roll.
Well, former Black Op Commander Colonel Don de Grand Prix, when he was dying on the verge of heart failure, came on our show and then died a few weeks later, and said, "Look, I've talked to all the Pentagon boys," and this was right after 9/11, and he said the Pentagon, a separate general based in Virginia, but it was the squadron out of North Dakota, the Happy Hooligans, they put 2 AIM-9s into that aircraft and that they bucked the order. And we know, this is declassified, we have the document, 2.5 months before 9/11, Cheney took the NORAD shoot-down power that generals always had as a default. They didn't need to have a president or vice president tell them, and took that power only unto himself. They put a whole new command structure in the week before the 9/11, so they'd be confused and not know what was going on. And then right after 9/11, Cheney gave the shoot-down power back to NORAD.
Well, and I also think it's significant that this PDAS message that was sent by the Air Force Chief of Staff was sent by General John Jumper, who had only assumed command of the Air Force on September 6, 2001. So 5 days before we have a new Air Force Chief of Staff.